Bigfoot, Yeti, the Chupacabra, the Jersey Devil, the Loch Ness Monster, and skinwalkers. What do they all have in common?
Can I?
Yes, you can tell.
In my opinion, they all have in common that they are bullshit.
Okay, that's not the word I was looking for.
Okay,
but...
they haven't been confirmed to exist, as in no one has confirmed. There is something out there,
Mm-hmm.
They're usually told to myths and urban legends. They all are unusual in the sense of there's what?
They're cryptids.
Oh yeah, okay, cryptids. But what does cryptid even mean?
Okay, I'll tell you. Cryptids are animals that cryptozoologists believe may exist somewhere in the wild but are not recognized by science. This is off of Wikipedia, by the way. Cryptozoology is a pseudoscience which primarily looks at anecdotal stories and other claims rejected by the scientific community. While biologists regularly identify new species following established scientific methodology, cryptozoologists focus on entities mentioned in folklore, record, and rumor.
Yeah.
Entities that may be considered cryptids by cryptozoologists include Bigfoot, Yeti, the Chupacabra, Jersey Devil, and the Loch Ness Monster. The most famous, of course, is Bigfoot, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you'd agree with that.
There is video of Bigfoot that helps that particular cryptid's presence in our culture.
Right.
But I actually saw something not long ago. That video is essentially confirmed to be fake.
It is. Yes.
Because the guy, they know who did it, who dressed up, probably. I don't know much about it, but from what I've heard, it's probably they know who the guy was because he was supposedly bragging about it.
I don't know if I copied that down.
The gait of the thing doesn't make any sense for anything but a person. And the guy supposedly, who it probably was, had, there are videos of him having the exact same gait as the thing, because it has a particular weird thing with the hands back and, yeah.
Okay, a typical Bigfoot sighting goes something like this. Someone is out in the woods, it's always woods, and they're away from people and they see a shape, a sort of human or ape-like shape. It's covered in fur and very large. It's lurching or running or otherwise moving through the forest, and sometimes they say they found huge footprints. In Florida, they call it the skunk ape, and it lives in swamps, but it's the same thing. What they describe is the same thing. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories, which we will tear apart because that's what we do, and then we'll go over some of those things about that. Okay, this was reported by the grandchild of the woman who saw it. So from here on, when I'm saying she, I'm talking about the woman who saw it, not the grandchild. Yeah. So she was 18 at the time, and the family lived somewhere near the Sulphur River bottom in extreme East Texas, southwest of Texarkana. So if you can kind of picture where that is.
Yeah.
The grandmother has since died, so this is very secondhand, and so it's going by what the granddaughter remembers the grandmother saying, but it's pretty bare bones, really. There's not much to it. So the grandmother and her family, she was only 18, so she and her family, her parents and siblings, were coming home from town one night because they lived out in the middle of nowhere in the boonies in a farmhouse, and they were riding in a mule-drawn wagon.
What year did you say this was?
I don't think she said what year it was, but even if this woman was, let's say she was 60, so 78 years ago, you're still talking about they should have had a car, but
yeah,
it was the boonies of eastern Texas.
Yeah.
Okay, so
and we've been there.
Yes, we have, and we left the campground because it was creepy.
Yeah, with kind of the same sort of thing going on,
except that it was probably creepy people.
Yeah.
Okay, so a mule was pulling the wagon. They're going down. They turn down the lane that goes to the farmhouse, and the mule started acting up. And her father thought, it must be a snake in the grass or something that's freaking him out. But then they heard something, and it was a screaming, squalling, high-pitched, eerie wail. That's how the granddaughter describes it. Who knows how the grandmother described it, but that's how the granddaughter describes it.
Telephone, people distort things.
So did the grandmother scream for the granddaughter to indicate what it sounded like? Who knows? So the moon was really big and high, and you could see pretty good because the moonlight was bright. The tree line beyond the east pasture where the sounds were coming from was very dark, however. The moonlight was not going into that. And they watched as a tall figure came out of the trees and stood full in the moonlight. It was as tall or taller than a man and covered with long dark hair. It stood absolutely erect and walked slowly toward them like a man, not slouching like an ape. All the time it was howling and shrieking and motioning angrily at them. Her father fired a shot at this thing and it turned and ran back in the woods. Okay, right here I'm going to stop and say, this could have been a person. It could have been a person who was injured or terrified.
Yeah, no kidding.
Or
what if like
had
like
some kind of
next
disability?
Door, they were mentally not all there, and this is just some kid.
Right.
He stepped on a fucking tack or something.
And it doesn't say how far away the tree line was, but it said it was beyond an east pasture. Pastures are usually pretty big. So that was a long ways away. And they could tell that it was covered in dark hair, even though it was in shadow.
That's the thing. At night, regardless whether it's bright lights, your color sense in your eyes is not working correctly.
Right.
Long way away, especially if there are shadows in general, whether or not, like, you can see in the shadows that it's like camouflage, And the fact that there are animals in existence, there are animals, they have fur, and some of them are big. Some of them make inhuman howls.
Okay, so I looked at a map of where bears are in the Americas. So the entire Americas. They're anywhere where there are trees, there are bears.
Bears, yeah. What about cougars, wildcats?
I didn't look that up,
like that?
but
because they make
screaming
sound.
and wail. Yes, I've heard a cougar, and it is. Yeah, it sounds like someone being murdered.
If you didn't know better, which you should, if you live in cougar territory, that they sound like a monster.
Even people who live someplace where that's something you hear, they might not recognize it as that because in the heat of the moment, it's nighttime. The mules are acting weird.
Yeah.
You're thinking there's a rattlesnake down there, and then all of a sudden you hear wailing, and you see somebody running across a field.
That's a good point.
But
your mental state, it dictates how you're interpreting.
Yeah, and he shot his gun at the person or thing. Absolutely nuts. So the next day, first they went into their house and they barricaded all the doors, freaking out. And the next day, for several days afterwards, the father and the brothers and the neighbors all went out looking for any sign of the thing, blood, assuming he hit it,
what the fuck?
fur tracks, and found nothing. That's because it was not something weird. It was something, a bear or a person. I am absolutely convinced of it, a bear or a person. I just can't imagine anything else. And probably it was a person, and probably a person who was hurt or in some way handicapped.
Issues.
Yeah. There, I don't know if I mentioned this, but there's a website called woodape.org. And
is that what that was? So is there a distinction? You have the swamp.
No, they just call it wood ape because they're ape-like creatures that live in the
American woods.
And they have 306 reported sightings. This was one of them. So that story I just read. In January of this year, someone reported another sighting also in Texas, Austin County, Texas. And they said that in the 24 hours before they saw this thing, there had been really bad weather, tornado warnings, hail, 100-mile-an-hour winds, flooding, trees down. It was unusually disruptive. So this person lives on a wooded multi-acre property with a pond. I don't know whether they were just bragging about that or if that was just a descriptor. And they were leaving their house and beginning up their driveway when they saw a bipedal man-like ape leap across the drive in one step and immediately disappear into the woods. Now, I've driven in a lot of woods, and I can tell you, when a bear runs out into the road, especially if the edge of the road is a little higher, it appears that they are taking some immense leap. And also your brain, your brain is not recording like a film. Your brain records things in a strange way.
Yeah.
You may not have seen the beginning steps, and then all of a sudden there it is, bam, and it's gone.
They do that though, and how their body, it's like a slinky.
Yeah.
You know, they can like extend it out. It's probably because you're seeing this mass of fur and you're not seeing.
And although bears usually walk on 4 legs, they have been known to walk on 2 legs, especially if they've stolen like a baby pig. I've seen photographs of a bear carrying a baby pig running with it.
Yeah. They can pick a lot up with their mouths.
Yeah. She said it appeared very tall, but the moment she saw it, it was literally in the air crossing. Yes. So it wasn't one step. It might have been run, 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 run. And then that's when they saw it. And they didn't see the run, 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 run. And then it, the bear freaked out. A car is there.
I just generally don't think you like the exact description of things that people say, you should never trust. You shouldn't even trust your own. I mean, if you've ever been in a situation like that, you get parts that don't agree with the other people who did see something that really happened.
Right.
So, and especially if like this one, like the previous one, this is a secondhand story, you can't, and then you have like further distortion.
Yeah. Okay, so this next part's kind of funny. They said it appeared tall. The moment they saw it, it was literally in the air crossing. They wrote that they had lived there for several years and are very familiar with the wildlife. The only larger animals are deer, hogs, and an occasional wayward cow. But the thing they saw was more than twice the height of any of those, and it was shaped like a huge man ape. Definitely upright, definitely no clothes, very deep black hair covering its body. It was a bear.
A man, that's how they described it? It was a man ape?
It was a bear. It had to be a bear.
I mean, whatever it was, they described it as an ape.
Yeah, they said a man ape.
It's weird because, well, one, people are apes. So
true. That is true.
But it's weird because if I didn't know like anything about cryptids and I know nothing like associated with American apes, which as far as I know, there aren't any other than humans.
Right. I don't think there are any apes that live on the Americas.
If I saw something like that, I would say it's an animal, it's a monster, it's a person, it's, I wouldn't describe it as an ape. And that's only important because if somebody else is saying ape, it's probably because they know some other information. Like they know of Bigfoot, the idea of Bigfoot, the swamp ape, or whatever. It's not just the word that's coming across, there's other concepts. Like if you had just been reading a book about Bigfoot and you were like obsessing about Bigfoot and thinking, oh, Bigfoot, what if I saw Bigfoot when I'm out, and then a bear runs across really fast, you're going to think, oh, Bigfoot. Like that's where your brain will go. And even if you see it later and, oh, it's just a bear, you will have, at least for a moment, recorded that in your brain as that was Bigfoot.
Okay, so this one expert said, it's like the stories of the vampire in Slavic cultures where there isn't a concrete description of what it is until Bram Stoker writes his book. And then everyone says, oh, that's what it looks like. Yeah. And then that's what they see.
Yeah.
Okay, so then...
Exactly.
And
that actually is almost like a cryptid as well. So spread through urban legend.
Yes.
Then it's like standardized in a way.
A cryptid is an animal, considered, it would be an animal, not a human being.
So one thing, cryptids, if we're talking about skinwalkers as well, that wouldn't be a cryptid then.
Okay, we're getting to that. Getting to that. Okay. You'll notice... Well, no, you won't notice because I added skinwalkers to that list. Skinwalker was not on the cryptid page.
Yeah, it wouldn't
be.
But
I added it because we had a discussion about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Although, I have to say, so when people are interested in cryptids, the majority of them are interested because it's like in the same category as conspiracy theories and like UFOs and stuff. It's mysterious. People haven't seen it other than glimpses. In that same category would also be things like skinwalkers and vampires, whatever. The real category that's interesting, the interest category, includes skinwalkers. The cryptid label is kind of just like, what value is it?
So about 2 years before that guy was driving down his driveway and he saw this thing, he said he'd heard a whooping sound from various directions in the woods. He thought it sounded more like an ape. Well, maybe it's a woman. I don't know. They thought it sounded more like an ape than anything else and definitely wasn't a boar or cattle. In an effort to identify it, this person went out and imitated the sound for people they knew to see if they could tell. And everyone thought it just sounded like a normal woods sound, just a normal sound of animals in the woods. And they thought it was hilarious that he was demonstrating this.
Yeah.
So they just never brought it up again. So that was the end of that. But when I was talking to my brother yesterday, Tom, he told me that he was camped out in the desert one time and he had just settled in, got his sleeping bag all set up and gotten into it. And it was getting dark, and from a ridge he heard a sound that sounded like someone laughing hysterically. And he's heard a lot of coyotes. It didn't really sound like a coyote. And it freaked him out. And at first he thought
desert witch.
His concern was that it was a person. That he's
that's the real. You're talking about like what's the most disturbing ape you want to see out in the wilderness?
Absolutely.
A fucking person.
Yeah. So he was pretty freaked out, and then after a little while he didn't hear anymore and he just went to sleep. And that is what a normal person does, right? You just say, you chalk it up to an animal.
Yeah.
If it's an animal that's dangerous, like the time that I heard coyotes outside, at first I thought it was teenagers screaming, and you were a baby and I was holding you in my arms, and India was only 2 and she was standing next to me, and we're standing outside, and I'm looking for like
in town?
Yeah. I'm looking for those damn teenagers that are hooping and hollering out there. And then I realized, no, it's a bunch of coyotes right out there on the street. And I grabbed the door and pushed India inside and ran inside and shut the door. Because that's what you do.
Yeah.
Animals can be dangerous.
Yeah.
People can be dangerous. Probably something that freaks you out, it might be dangerous. So protect yourself, but don't go assuming that it's something bizarre. Okay. And then there's another website that also maps Bigfoot sightings, and it's called bigfootmap.com, and they track stories and map them with GIS. So it has a whole map of the United States. It actually, you could look at the whole world, but it's mainly, just so you know, all of them are in the United States.
Yeah, some of that is a bias towards where there's going to be more sightings. So if you have 2 cities, one has a population of 10 million, one has a population of 1 million, you could just generally accept there's going to be like 10 times more around the city with 10 million.
Except I didn't really see that. When I just looked at the map, and before I started delving into it, it looked like in suburban areas. And medium-sized towns, not huge cities. But definitely there weren't very many, even in wooded areas, that were very rural. Now, yes, there's less people there, but you would think that if it's a wild animal, that's where they'd be.
Well, you're also seeing a bias towards whether or not there's local urban legends, how superstitious are the people, how educated are the people, because regardless whether or not the phenomenon is real, if the so-called educated culture rejects that, then the educated people are more likely to reject it. Mostly, though, if, like, for instance, frequently you'll see stuff like in there's like a map, of points for some statistic. You'll see it's like around the Mississippi and then east. There's more, inexplicably. It's because there's just generally more people over there.
Okay, so on bigfootmap.com, there was a report of a sighting not too far from here in Orinoco in 1980.
Wow.
A lady and her daughter saw it while the lady was driving her daughter to school in Webb City, where she was going to go to a swim meet or something. I thought, well, that's, there's woods there between Orinoco and here, but there's a lot of houses. So I looked it up. Are there black bears here? And there are black bears here. They generally aren't seen north of Highway 44, which is just at the bottom of range line, but they sometimes come up this high. So it could have been a black bear. And here's the thing that it just astounded me. They range in size from 4 to 6.5 feet tall and weigh between 90 and 900 pounds. That's a huge range.
Yeah, it probably varies across the year, too.
Oh,
because going into hibernation, they should have more resources.
Age, time of year, sex of the animal. So anyway, that was interesting. I also looked in the area of Wisconsin where we were, and there were none right there. There was none north of Rice Lake and south of Hayward. It was pretty much nothing. But in Hayward, there were several. And so I clicked on them and read them. And all of them were people who were from somewhere else. They were staying at a cabin in the woods.
Yeah.
So they were city people staying in a cabin.
If you're already primed for, I'm in vacation land, it's just like entertainment.
I don't know if you remember this. When we first bought that place up there, it seemed like the people who would come there from elsewhere treated it almost like it was Disneyland.
Yeah.
Like, the people were there for their entertainment, and the buildings, that's not really how the buildings look naturally. They had made them look that way, which is not true because the people really are that way. And it's just really that way. But they acted like it was all, everything was manufactured for their pleasure and their amusement.
Including the Bigfoots.
Including the Bigfoot. The Yeti is basically Bigfoot on steroids. Like if Bigfoot is a black bear, the Yeti would be a polar bear
or something.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's sometimes referred to as the abominable snowman if it's white.
So it's a white Bigfoot.
Sometimes they're different colors. So it could be grizzly bears, polar bears.
Literally, it could be a bear.
Yeah. And they are spotted in the Himalayan mountain ranges in Asia, although also in Russian folklore, the same thing is called the chuchuna, and it's said to dwell in Siberia, which is also a wooded, very cold area. And
with fucking bears, right?
Yeah, and there they say it has black hair. The nomadic Yakut and Tungus tribes describe it as well-built, Neanderthal-like man wearing pelts and bearing a white patch of fur on its forearms, and it eats human flesh.
Wow. Go ahead.
Okay, the Yeti was part of the pre-Buddhist beliefs of several Himalayan people. The Lepcha people worshipped a glacier being as a god of the hunt, and followers of the bone religion once believed the blood of the wild man had use in certain spiritual ceremonies. The being was depicted as an ape-like creature who carries a large stone as a weapon and makes a whistling swoosh sound. The Yeti was adopted into Tibetan Buddhism, where it's considered a non-human animal, but it's human enough to be able to follow Dharma. Interesting. Several stories feature Yetis becoming helpers and disciples to religious figures. In Tibet, images of Yetis are paraded and occasionally worshipped as guardians against evil spirits. And then there's some scientific stuff that they did. So in 2007, an American television guy and his team reported finding a series of footprints in the Everest region of Nepal, and the footprints were 13 inches in length, which I have to say, barefoot in Nepal seems right there. It seems like, what?
Yeah.
13 inches is long, but there are men with 13-inch long feet. So
yeah.
They had 5 toes and they were 9.8 inches across. My foot is 10 inches long. Of course, I have slipper on, so you can't tell, but so it's almost as wide as my foot is long. That would be a triangular shaped foot. The casts were made of the prints for further research, but Jeffrey Meldrum of the Idaho State University, he looked at them and he said that he didn't think that's what they were. First he said, yeah, I don't think these are fake. And then he said, nah, I changed my mind. And in 2009, they tested some hair samples from apparently these sightings or these footprints, and they reported that the initial tests were inconclusive, but eventually they decided it had come from a Himalayan goral. Now, I had never heard of an Himalayan goral, but that's in the biological family of cloven-hoofed ruminant animals that include cattle, bison, buffalo, and antelopes. So in other words, some kind of deer-like cloven-hoofed animal.
A mountain animal.
So who knows what that footprint was they saw, but it was not Yeti.
Okay, so assuming there are Bigfoot-like creatures, one, it doesn't just disappear, like you may not follow it, but it's not just gone. Out there are creatures, and there must be more than one, unless they're each individually immortal.
Right.
That's one thing. The other thing is, if there is Bigfoot or Yeti or whatever, non-human ape monsters. So assuming they exist, there's also going to be sightings that are fake. So there's going to be real sightings, there's going to be fake sightings, no matter what, even if it exists. And there's going to be hoaxes too. So that's not just like a fake sighting where it was a misidentification. They went out of their way to replicate, knowing what they were doing, replicate as if it was a real thing. So that said, going back to, if you assume that they're real, there has to be male and female versions to reproduce, and children versions.
True.
Like if you took a modern sighting of Bigfoot in US, which like none of those stories were fairly.
No, some of them were like.
Yeah. So some stories are going to be modern. I mean, again, if there's real sightings, if there's fake sightings, there's going to be some from either of those category now. So that means, for instance, if you went to West Virginia and there's a Bigfoot sighting, if the Bigfoot, like if there's a sighting of Bigfoot here, that is an area bounded by roads, like regardless, and there's clusters of houses and there's people all fucking over it. Hunters, animals also will respond to something like that.
Yeah, you'd think dogs would be barking.
Yeah, so if there's a sighting here, that thing either never goes outside of that partition, or it does, and then it risks being seen again. Okay, so it got seen once. It's probably going to be seen like that as it's moving around. But one thing, as far as I know, that has never happened convincingly, is it's walked in front of a trail camera. There are trail cameras.
Oh, that's true.
Everywhere.
And think about, they catch some weird things on trail cameras.
So it's not just like hunters. The DNS, whatever.
DNR, Department of Natural Resources.
DNR. In whatever departments in each state, they keep track of animal populations. For instance, wild boars. Wild boars are a huge problem. So they put up like wildlife cameras to see where they are. Those wildlife cameras are much more likely to catch something like that. So you're talking about more than one, which is probably crossing roads, crossing trail cameras. Where are the sightings, like on highway cameras or wilderness webcams or trail cameras? You know,
dash cams. People driving down the road.
Those are the kinds of things, like, that's really good evidence. Like, nowadays it could be faked easily, but videos not so much. But even so, you dress up in a suit, it doesn't matter. You're just standing there against the side of the road. Someone's going to pick up eventually with a trail camera or with a dash cam. So again, even if you assume it's true, it's really hard to see how that would work. Like, for instance, if there was sightings of dodos, which are extinct, but relatively recently extinct. There were sightings of dodos, which lived in America, as far as I know.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, east coast of America, I think.
I'm going to fact check you.
Yeah, fact check me, because I'm pretty sure that's right, but I'm not totally sure. So if somebody sighted a dodo, which would make much more sense. We know dodos existed. The idea that there was a small population of dodos that persisted all this time, that's not like totally out of this world, you know? That's really believable to some degree. It's like this. Imagine a good test for anything like this is, what's like, how far does it spread, you know?
Okay.
If there was a sighting of a dodo, just like suddenly someone said, there's a sighting of a dodo, then biologists might go out there, you know? Because that's like...
That would be remarkable.
It would be remarkable. It could be possible. Small enclave of dodos or somewhere, you know? So it spreads not just from that myth, but goes to research, biologists.
Okay, so I have a couple more weird things that I want to tell you about.
Okay, go ahead.
And then we'll, and one of them is going to tie into what you're talking about. Okay, but first I'm going to tell you, the dodo was endemic to the island of, I'm going to mess it up because I don't know how to say it, Mauritius, which is east of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean.
Well, there was an American dodo.
There was something called the Nicobar pigeon, which they thought was a different variety of dodo, but it is not.
In the Americas?
No. It was on...
I swear to God.
Okay, well...
American dodo.
Okay, I'm going to say American dodo
Look
then.
that up.
Jesus. American dodo. American dodo.
No?
Is the dodo extinct in the U.S.? All that remains of the dodo is a head and foot at Oxford, a foot in the British Museum, a head in Copenhagen, and skeletons more or less complete.
Why they ask the question if there's not the implication that there wasn't?
Okay, American dodo. Despite its name, it's not an extinct dodo species at all, but a close relative of one. It resembles a hybrid between an extinct dodo and an extinct Rodriguez solitaire. It is indigenous to the forest grasslands and swamps of North America. It's an omnivore that feeds mainly on fruits, roots, tubers, insects, and smaller animals. American dodos fiercely protect their eggs and chicks. So there's something called an American dodo,
but it's actually not extinct.
Actually, it kind of looks like a goose.
That's true. Although I guess dodos, the reconstructions look kind of weird like that.
Ducky goosey. Okay, so I'm just going to tell a few more really quick.
Yeah.
Chupacabra, which literally means goat sucker. And it was first talked about in Puerto Rico in like the 1920s, but published sightings didn't start coming around until 1995. It is almost universally accepted by zoologists and scientists as canids with mange.
Yeah.
Whether it's a coyote or a dog or a wolf.
This is the thing. Someone makes the claim, oh, look, there was a chupacabra sighting. They go out, and they happen to find like a corpse, and they test it, it's a dog.
Yeah.
Or they go out and they see something and they go over and it's a coyote and it has mange. I mean, it's like, someone made the claim, if no one had gone out or they couldn't find it, it wouldn't have been confirmed it was something with mange. And so it would have stayed as, there's this creature out there.
And so, before 1995 in Puerto Rico, which probably, I know they have a lot of poverty in Puerto Rico, it would be, it would not be outrageous to think that there are probably dogs having babies that are not, they're not fixed, they're just having babies, so it's probably have a dog problem there. Mange generally comes from the mother to the puppies, and then the puppies have mange and they have their own life. Mange is a skin disease caused by parasitic mites, which researchers say impacts an animal's appearance and actions. They've lost almost all their hair except for a little bit between their shoulder blades, which sticks up. Their skin is gray and scaly and looks quite gaunt.
Yeah. Which is like this description of the goat sucker.
Right. Mange can also attack deer and raccoons, by the way. So there could be
deer can get pretty fucking crazy looking.
Yeah.
From
disease.
From ticks, disease, cancer.
That chronic wasting disease.
Yeah.
Okay, so then another one.
And their feet, their legs are really like brittle. And so they'll often snap their leg off, but they'll still be walking around. It's creepy.
Yeah, I've seen three-legged deer.
It's terrifying.
So another cryptid is called the Jersey Devil. And I don't know if this actually qualifies as
a cryptid.
But
that's what I mean.
Listed as a cryptid. It is said to inhabit the forests of Pine Barrens in South Jersey. It's also been seen in Philadelphia area. It's been described as a flying biped with hooves. Other descriptions are that it looks like a bipedal kangaroo, a wyvern-like creature with a horse or goat-like head, leathery bat-like wings, horns, small arms, clawed hands, legs with cloven hooves. This sounds
It's interesting. It's
really
so old paintings of like demons and things.
Yeah.
They would often like add details from different animals, and that was like,
well, yes, because it all started, there was a lady back in the 1700s named Jane Leeds. She was known as Mother Leeds. She had 12 children. When she found out she was pregnant for the 13th time, she cursed the child, crying that the child would be the devil.
Why the fuck would she do that?
Well, this is what they say. Who knows if she said that or not? So in 1735, she went into labor on a stormy night. Her friends were there gathering around her to help her. The baby was born a normal child, but quickly changed into a creature with hooves, a goat's head, bat wings, forked tail, growling and screaming. The child beat everyone with its tail before flying up the chimney and heading into the pines. And now lives there. So the Humane Society of New Jersey thinks that it's probably really, when people say they've seen it, it's probably really a sandhill crane.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I could see, because they look kind of weird.
Yeah.
And they sound weird.
However, one time, an outdoorsman and author, Tom Brown Jr., spent several seasons living in the wilderness of Pine Barrens. He recounts occasions when terrified hikers mistook him for the Jersey Devil because he'd covered his whole body with mud to repel mosquitoes. Okay, so that one is just like totally off the charts of stupid.
It's crazy, yeah.
So no lady had her baby, like, cursed it. And...
Real quick. Also, another test is how complicated is it? Like, we know dodos existed, so if there's something that looks like sighted that looks like a dodo, it doesn't need this huge model to describe how this is possible. But you have something like that. I mean, go through it. The lady, she cursed the baby and had 13 kids and fucking, like, has weird chimera shit all over it. To describe what they're seeing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the next one because everyone knows about it, the Loch Ness Monster. But I will say that, okay, so it's a sea serpent-like creature that people say they've seen since 1933 in a lake in Scotland. They have proven that the famous surgeon's photograph was faked. There have actually been scientists who went and took DNA samples from the lake, tons of them, to try and figure out what's in the lake. And although there seemed to be more eels than anything else, there was nothing. Everything could be identified. There's nothing else. Google Street View users can explore the lake above and below the water. Google spent a week at Loch Ness collecting images with a trekker camera attached to a boat. So they did the surface. You can go out there and look at the surface of the lake. And they worked with the Catlin Sea View survey to photograph underwater. So you can look underwater too.
You can, there's like probably images from all over.
They probably took the images underwater in the same way Street View takes the images above water.
Yeah.
So that you can navigate.
That's cool. Although if the thing was mobile, which presumably it is, considering it is said to have swum up to the surface, poked its head out, whatever. It could just move away from anything it hears is trying to take.
That is true. However, it has been unequivocally proven that the most famous picture of it was faked.
Yeah.
There's just no evidence that it actually exists at all. None whatsoever. Okay, so let's just toss that to the side now. Skinwalker. Let's just talk about Skinwalker.
Okay.
In Navajo culture, a skinwalker is a type of harmful witch who has the ability to turn into, possess, or disguise themselves as an animal. And that's why some people consider a skinwalker a cryptid, because she is disguised as an animal. In the Navajo language, the name, which I'm not even going to try and say it because I would just butcher it, translates to by means of it goes on all fours. So it means that the way this thing travels is on all fours.
Okay.
So the Skinwalker legend has inspired modern video games, movies, whole generations.
I should say the modern version of Skinwalker is not like a Navajo legend.
No.
It's not like, oh, here's this creature that can like wear skins. It's here's a fucking supernatural shapeshifter demon that is barely even corporeal, you know.
In mid to late 2020, skinwalkers for some reason became popular through the various social medium platforms, most notably
I think where people were making scary stories about
and there was a lot of YouTube videos, there were a lot of podcasts done on it. There were just people were talking about skinwalkers, and they were depicting them as creatures disguised as living things, and they were trying to imitate them. It was just really awful. So I'm not Navajo. I read a little bit about what the Navajo say, and so maybe I have this wrong, but it sounds like the skinwalker stories that the Navajo tell are actually stories that are more to inform and educate, and they talk about a struggle that the human has with the skinwalker, and the skinwalker is actually an allegory for a moral struggle or dilemma.
Makes sense.
The Navajo, when asked, say that it's not well understood because we're not going to talk about it, and you would have to have lived and experienced the Navajo culture to understand it. So I believe that the whole skinwalker thing, if anything would be considered cultural appropriation, a bunch of white people taking the skinwalker stories and twisting them for their own use.
One thing I think is the modern skinwalker stories, it's essentially they're only using the name. It's a completely different concept.
Right.
Have you seen any of the scary? I mean, they're scary stories. It's not like people might say, though this really happened, but
is
again,
it more
it's a
like
myth.
Thin Man type thing?
Yeah. what was that called? Slenderman.
Slenderman, that's what I meant.
Yeah. The structure of the story is more or less a bunch of kids out in the woods or campers or whatever, and one of them goes off to explore something. It's like dusk. It's like the evening. It's twilight.
Getting dark.
And so someone walks off, and when they come back, they're acting weird, or they're like stilted.
Like they're possessed. Or
they can't walk normal, and then sometimes people slowly get picked off, or they disappear, or they hear like inhuman screams. But it's around the idea of someone goes off, when they come back they're acting weird, essentially, or someone comes in from a natural area and they're acting weird. It's an interesting concept because it's the idea that someone goes somewhere, something happens, you don't know what, and you don't even think anything of it, and then when they come back they're acting different. That's a very general structure, and the idea, like, you could be out there and then get, I don't know, possessed by a skinwalker. I don't really know.
And so the people who say they've seen skinwalkers are just as misguided as the people who say they see Bigfoot or a Chupacabra.
Well, it's especially bad with the skinwalker thing because the modern version is it's a person they see who's acting weird. Even the most normal people act weird sometimes.
This is true.
You can't, 100% cannot rely on them acting normal as a sign that they're not possessed.
So trying to make sense of skinwalkers is, as I said, cultural appropriation to the extreme. It's like atheists using Jesus stories to scare children or something. I mean, that's so bizarre.
Or Satan, rather. If Jesus was coming to get you, he'd probably be coming to, like, heal your broken arm.
Okay, I didn't even think, but maybe it'd be Satan. I just immediately went to Jesus.
Jesus is, theoretically the most benign figure.
Okay, you're right. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about, this is my most favorite part of the whole thing, because there's truth to it.
Okay, go ahead.
Kangaroos in Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So in 2018, a motorist reported seeing a kangaroo hopping across the interstate near Grand Chute. But people have been seeing kangaroos in Wisconsin since 1899. Now, before you think, as I did, when you as a small child said you were out in the woods and you came back and said you saw a kangaroo out in the woods, and I just assumed it was a deer jumping and twisting and just at the right angle. They do kind of, they kind of do look like a kangaroo. Because I've seen that before. Oh, no, 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 no. Police officers have caught them. They've actually caught the kangaroos. They don't know where they came from, so they haven't caught a lot.
It's like a zoo break.
No.
Or somebody had them as pets.
Okay. One time they thought
breeding them.
One time they thought that a kangaroo had escaped from a circus that had recently been in town, but the circus said they didn't have any kangaroos. Police officers in 1974 spotted a kangaroo, which they spent 5 days trying to capture. They said it was between 4 and 6 feet tall, gray, had a pouch, never caught it. Another kangaroo sighting was reported 100 miles from Chicago. This was in 78 in Waukesha. They said the school bus driver called to report the sighting of 2 kangaroos. She said, "I'm sane, sober, and I saw kangaroos." She thought they were deer at first. People were honking, slamming on their brakes. Finally, one guy hit one, but it got up and hopped away. A week later, another kangaroo was spotted in a town called Pewaukee, and 12 additional people saw it. Then there were some people who started playing pranks, and they started faking that they saw kangaroos. The guy and his friend, they made a kangaroo cutout from plywood, and they started putting it around, and then somebody figured that out. The Wisconsin Department of Agriculture actually issued a press release in 1978 urging Wisconsin residents to beware of kangaroos and to keep pets away from them because they could carry diseases.
Yeah.
They've been spotted in Iowa County, Wisconsin in 2005. And the Dodgeville Chronicle said that a 150-pound red kangaroo was captured, and when no one came forward to claim it, they gave it to Madison's Zoo.
It's kind of crazy because, theoretically, if they could find something to eat, they could just keep reproducing and
except they
populate
can't.
the area.
I looked it up. Could a kangaroo survive a Wisconsin winter?
But yeah, exactly. The winter, they would absolutely all die out in one winter.
So, but one guy, in 75 miles from the Iowa County kangaroo capture, so that was in 2005 where they found that one, a guy in Mauston hit and killed a kangaroo with his truck in the middle of winter. December 7th, and it's
It was
cold. And,
just alive.
and he found evidence that he believed it had been living in a culvert near his house.
So another thing is, again, if somebody was breeding them and housed them in winter, I mean, you could see one gets loose and was running around in winter.
There were people who have kangaroos, and there was zoos and stuff, and they came forward and said, all of ours are accounted for. It's not one of ours. Because if it was one of theirs, they would have gone and gotten it.
Yeah.
No. So there are kangaroos living in Wisconsin.
And surviving.
And December 7th, it is cold in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
It was living in a culvert on his property. So,
although that is another case where if they're reproducing, there should be baby ones as well. There should be male and female kangaroos plus baby kangaroos. So if they hit one, for instance, and it had babies in its pouch, then
right.
you could be sure they're reproducing out there, and not just somewhere else where they're protected and then being brought there.
You would think.
And there's like an unlimited number of possibilities how that could happen, including like a strategic release by somebody who's really into this prank, or somebody who wants to hunt them.
So expensive to do that.
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking they eat them in Australia.
No.
Like, I believe they...
Oh, that's gross.
Some people eat them.
Do people eat kangaroos?
And I think they hunt them too because they can be a nuisance.
Yeah, I know they're a nuisance.
So, maybe somebody has a taste. They moved to Wisconsin from Australia. That sounds like a nice...
Do people eat kangaroos? Absolutely. Cooking kangaroo at home is much like cooking the perfect steak.
No, I'll take a fucking pass.
Okay, so I did think of something. What if some super uber rich person had some property in Wisconsin and they wanted a private hunting estate, which is entirely possible, because I know they do that in Texas, and they put exotic animals there.
Yeah.
And for rich people to come and kill them, and that's what it was.
Yeah.
That could be. Because then either they're replenishing their supply or they're breeding them on their property, and they are not going to own up to it because it's highly illegal to have exotic animals and shit.
And can kill them.
Yeah. Eating a kangaroo. Ugh. Yeah, I made a mistake looking up eating kangaroos. It was absolutely revolting. But I could see also that somebody might be raising kangaroos for food, for exotic meat.
I mean, imagine if
and
you're
those big turkey farms with the big giant, super long, hundreds of feet long barns.
Yeah,
they could have kangaroos.
Exactly. So some get loose and they don't want to cause problems. One thing was that I saw what looked like a kangaroo, and it looked like, in my memory, it looks exactly like a kangaroo. But also, black bears, when they stand up, have a similar appearance to a kangaroo. If you're just looking at it like just a flash, they have long faces, their hands come inward when they're standing up.
But also a deer jumping.
Yeah.
Because when they jump,
I saw, it was,
yeah,
and then like I took off.
Yeah.
So like a deer, that's a much more quicker thing occurring. So the other thing is like that's another good example. I think you should expect some like more varied interaction with these things than just sighting. If somebody hits them with their car, like there are a lot of car, deer, and bear and whatever collisions. You don't hear about them because they're more or less super common.
Yeah.
Whereas if someone hit like the huge bear, it lives in Kentucky and it's 16 feet long. You'd expect someone to hit it and then it would be like, yeah, we hit a huge bear and look, here it fucking is. It totaled my car because it's huge. That's what you'd expect. Remember that show we watched? They had this like deep sea fish.
Oh yeah,
long fish, and it's
some kind of eel
really
thing.
rare to find one. But it's because they live in the deep sea. When they come up, they die, or when they die, they come up. And what happened? Well, people went out and studied it. Loch Ness Monster. People did go out and study it, and that was basically the end of it, right?
Yeah. No, I think there are people who still believe,
and have sightings, but
people still believe that Loch Ness Monster exists. So here's the most important thing about the kangaroo stories. We absolutely know there were kangaroos in Wisconsin.
Yeah,
I don't
confirmed.
know. Yeah, it's confirmed. They have bodies. The police saw them. Man hit it with a car. But the police have never caught a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Nobody has ever hit a Bigfoot with a car.
Exactly. So the stories are less varied.
Right.
They're of one form.
It's almost always in the distance
Yeah.
in the dark or in the shadows,
Yeah.
there is something, and they think it's a ape-like man.
And no one even says, yeah, I know Jim Bob, he hit a Bigfoot and now it's up on his wall.
Right.
You know, or like a taxidermied Bigfoot. Yes, this is a real, genuine Bigfoot.
Nobody even says they hit it. That's the other thing. None of those reports, and I didn't read them all, but if there was one, it would have come up in some other search, not just on those 2 pages that have mapped them.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody said, yeah, I hit a Bigfoot, but I just buried the body because it stunk or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nobody said that because it didn't happen.
Yeah. So
you hit something, you think, oh my God, it's Bigfoot. And you get out and say, oh, it's a black bear.
Yeah. And this is on cryptids are another good example, I think, of you should expect more mundane things to be more likely. I mean, just generally, if you have experience with something, you should use that as an interpretation of something else before using something you have no information about, you know? So like the dodo thing, it's more surprising that there are stories of like flying devil creatures or whatever than that there's a sighting of an ancient extinct creature.
Nobody's saying, I saw a dodo. They're saying, I saw a witch with a forked tail.
And like leather bat wings and it came out of somebody.
You know, I saw an ape man or whatever.
Although in the case, if it was like the cryptid, the Great North American bonobo, and it's like, now that would be, okay, I could kind of see it, you know? Or the Great North American kangaroo. It's like, okay, I could see that. And then it happens to be fucking confirmed. There are, like, somebody is releasing kangaroos or they're breeding. That is less surprising, right? Because it's not, you know, there really are kangaroos on Earth.
Right.
There are really bonobos on Earth.
Right.
It's just like the location is shifted, so it's less surprising. A giant fuzzy man that people only can see if it's like half a mile away in twilight.
And presumably, if you're living in eastern Texas in the boonies and you got a gun, you're probably a pretty good shot.
Yeah.
And he thought he hit it. No, none of it makes sense.
No blood, too?
Never found blood.
Yeah, so...
Never found blood, never found tracks.
No shit, too.
True.
Think about shit.
True.
Like, you would expect something.
There'd be scat.
One thing that DNR people do, I think it's DNR, they'll go out and take surveys of animal shit. It's an indication that's left. That's pretty obvious.
You don't have to
tells
spot
their
the
diet.
animal.
It tells the density of their population. And
actually, they sometimes even do DNA on it.
Yeah,
and they know what animal it was.
So what, Bigfoot, they just happen to look exactly like, what, bear shit?
But it doesn't matter
or
because
dog shit?
They're looking at that too. It just doesn't matter. So I have never believed in Bigfoot or Yeti or Chupacabra or skunk ape or what was
Jersey
the other one?
Devil.
Or the Jersey Devil. Never even heard of that one until today.
What about Mothman? Or Mothman? Is that it? It's like a giant moth or something. It's shaped like a man, or it looks like a devil or something, and it flies around.
Mothman, I think, came from a comic book, didn't it?
No, it's like a moth creature or something.
Mothman. Oh, West Virginia.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. West Virginia folklore, the Mothman is a humanoid creature in the Point Pleasant area, and it was seen from November 15th, 1966 to December 15th, 1967, so an entire year.
It's a
couple see man-sized bird creature or something.
It's a fucking owl.
Yeah, it was an owl.
You look at the thing, it's an owl, obviously.
It's an owl. At least 100 people saw it.
And they can get big. They sound weird. They're all over the place.
Glowing eyes.
And they're elusive.
Okay, so the prevailing hypothesis associated with Mothman at the time of the original sighting was that it was a misidentified sandhill crane due to the size of the bird, as well as reddish flesh around the crane's eyes.
I wouldn't take the color of the eyes in the stories as any indication, because people tend to combine aspects of different stories. So like, oh, it's like glowing red eyes.
Okay, so
you know?
then it gets stupid. Some pseudoscience adherents, such as ufologists, how do you say that?
Ufologists, I think.
Paranormal authors and cryptozoologists claim that Mothman was an alien.
Oh my god.
A supernatural
Does that make it a cryptid?
I don't know. A supernatural manifestation or a previously unknown species
What do
of
they
animal.
mean by supernatural manifestation?
Meaning like it's something from another dimension.
It's not like a divine creature, but it's like we're using physics that we don't have any indications.
Right.
It's like paranormal physics.
Yes. But this guy named Keel, I don't know who he is, some author, he claimed that the Point Pleasant residents experienced precognitions, including premonitions of the collapse of the Silver Bridge, UFO sightings, and visits from inhuman or threatening men in black, and other phenomena that was associated with Mothman.
We were talking about electronic voices or stopping clocks or something. And it's interesting because you could imagine some explanation from beyond our understanding of the universe or whatever. But like this, like even the stories are pretty mundane. You can't really take it very far.
You're right. It's mundane. It's really kind of boring.
If you were really out and you really saw and I really saw Bigfoot, sure, you'd be freaked out. But it'd be like, imagine this, you're out and you see a 10-foot long wolf. You'd be fucking freaked out.
I saw a cougar once. I was freaked out.
Yeah. You hear one, you're freaked out.
Yeah.
You see like a giant owl swoop over you. They do that.
Yeah.
You'd be freaked out. It's like there are some situations out there that you're going to be surprised and freaked out about.
Nature can freak you out. Nature can be dangerous. Yeah. Nature can be astounding. But my bottom line excitement of the whole thing, kangaroos in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
That was the best.
It's nice when it's actually confirmed. This is a real thing. You could really see
And then
this.
you can say, I wonder how there are kangaroos.
So like imagine this. 20 years from now, there's like a massive campaign. We'll find Bigfoot. They put out things and then they discover Bigfoot and they know where it lives. They have pictures of it, videos. They go out and communicate with it. And then they have it live in a fucking zoo and it tours the country and it's in a traveling like troupe. And okay. It's like, here's a thing that's an elusive thing. It's very unique to see it, and it's Bigfoot, okay? Here's the thing. It's very elusive. It's rare to see it, and it's a spinning multiple rings of fire and eyes and divine portal to another dimension, and its very existence warps your mind. Now, that's a whole different fucking thing. If that was a common thing, it would change everything. Now, finding a swamp ape or whatever, and it looks like an ape, and it walks around, like, even if it was confirmed, it's not that interesting,
No, it's not interesting because of this. It's not killing people. It's not a danger to people.
Yeah, it has no effect whatsoever.
No effect.
Other than it freaks people out briefly when they see it, if that's really actually what's happening.
When I say I don't believe in cryptids, I mean that I don't believe that Bigfoot and Yeti and Chupacabra have actually been seen by the people who claim to have seen them. I do believe that the world is a big place and much is not known. So, yeah, some strange creature might exist. I just don't think much of these stories. But if you've seen a cryptid, I'd really like to hear from you. Where, when, and how? Come on, tell me everything. Our contact information is in the show notes, and as always, if you have a story you want to tell, send it to us. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and never be so terrified you can't run.